So before I start today, I think I need to get my mom up here to do this temple talk, and I need to take over for her, holding that beautiful baby. So, today is a very special day at Pecatonica Parish. It's our annual meeting. It's time that we reflect back on what we've accomplished in 2011, and it's time to begin planning for 2012. Now that should be very exciting. So, I don't understand. Why do we only have like 10% of our membership here with us this morning? Not that I don't like to see the church full, but where's everybody else? Don't they care? Hold on to that thought. I'm going to come back to it. Last year at this time, Elaine Becker and I were making our final plans for our mission trip to Matamoros, Mexico. When we returned home from that trip, I commented to many that it was a life-changing experience for me. It was, but I couldn't put my finger on exactly what had changed. It wasn't until the January 2012 Lutheran came out that I put my finger on what had changed. There was an article on the front page that was said, "Empathy will change your life." So I thought I'd better look at that. It was the story centered around the Good Samaritan. Now we, of course, being Christian people, instantly relate to the closest to the Good Samaritan, because we wouldn't walk by someone who needs some help like the priest and the Levite did. But do we? Sympathy is described as sorrow for another's pain. Empathy, on the other hand, is the understanding of another's feelings. You can feel sympathy for me when you care about me and I'm in trouble. You can also share my feelings, especially in times of loss and grief. But empathy is something deeper than sympathy. It's not only feeling someone else's feelings. Empathy is a sensitivity to another person's life, an identification with the life of others, and the experiencing of someone else's life and struggles. The Samaritan man didn't just say, "Oh, I'm sorry this happened to you, sir," or give an excuse not for helping the man. He did what he could to help, even though that man was a Jew and a complete stranger and a foreigner. I have 3 experiences of my own that I'd like to share with you this morning to show the difference between sympathy and empathy. When Danny lost his mom and dad, we had an outpouring of people who expressed their sympathy for our loss. But there were others who physically showed up at our house with hugs and food. At the time, I couldn't understand why people were bringing us food. We had food, but I thanked them for their kindness and brought the food with when we went to Danny's brothers to make the arrangements. As we were together with Danny's brother's home dealing with our grief and taking care of those arrangements, it got to be lunchtime. There were close to 30 of us there at the house, and no one had thought about making food for what to eat. The food that had been given to us. There was food enough for everybody to eat. Obviously, those that had come to our house had experienced something similar and appreciated the food that had been brought to them, and they expressed their sympathy, yes, but they also empathized with what we were going through and how much that empathy was appreciated. Sympathy versus empathy. I had a dear friend call me up a short time ago, sobbing on the phone. Her dad had just had surgery for a cancerous tumor on his voice box, and things had not gone well. He'd permanently lost his voice, and he had to have a trach put in because he was not able to breathe. MedFlight had taken him to UW Hospital in Madison, as he was in very critical condition. Her heart ached to go see him, but her vehicle was not in good working condition, and she was not comfortable driving in Madison. All she asked was that I say a prayer with her on the phone, and asked if I would start the church prayer chain for her dad. That I did. But my heart told me to go farther. I told her I could be ready in 5 minutes if she wanted to go see her dad, and we did. Sympathy versus empathy. On November 18th, my dear friend's 3-month-old daughter had a brain hemorrhage and was taken by MedFlight to UW Children's Hospital in Madison. Did I have sympathy for her? Oh, absolutely. I couldn't imagine the sorrow of a mother's pain seeing her daughter wheeled off by MedFlight, strapped tightly to a very small backboard. Did I have empathy? It never even occurred to me not to. There was no way I was going to leave her side. That night, or for almost every day for the next 6 weeks? Sympathy or empathy? So what does all this sympathy and empathy stuff have to do with the Pecatonica Parish having its annual meeting today? I believe it has everything to do with today's meeting. I think sympathy and empathy should be our theme for the year, to see if it changes your life like it did mine, to see if it changes the life of our parish. We as a parish need to be actively ready to go into 2012 as God's people, in this place, at this time. Jesus said, "Follow me," but I'm too old. I'm too busy. I don't have much money. I'm not very good at introducing myself to people I don't know. After all, I am Scandinavian. The list of excuses can go on and on and on. But last Sunday, Pastor Mark's sermon hit it perfectly. Mark wrote, "So maybe it's not so much that you jump in or do just dip a toe in the water. Maybe it's more sensible than either of those extremes. Maybe it's all about bringing the good news of God, having the kingdom of God come near in all stages of our life, in all parts of our lives, in our work, in our families, in our play, and in all that we do. Maybe it involves the asking the question always, God, what do you want of me this day, in this place, at this time? And the answer is simply to see who needs to be fed, who needs to be healed, who needs to be taught. How will God use me on this day, and in what way? God will be with me on my drive to work. God will be beside me in my office, in my classroom, at lunch break, at home with my family, in the coffee shop while I have coffee, at the post office while I get the mail. In all those places, I will be meeting many people, maybe just for a second, maybe for a few minutes. So how can God help me tune my attention to these people God is surrounding me with this day? A simple greeting, a good hello, spending extra 10 seconds talking whether just may be the present for another. Just how might God be using me? In survey after survey, the results are crystal clear. Those who find ways to volunteer their time tremendously fulfilled in doing so. How many times do people say, you know, I thought I was going to help them, but they ended up helping me more? The Habitat House is a good example. It's just plain fun. Everyone is there for a good cause and everyone is getting along, and as long as you are not the person responsible for setting up the tasks that need to be doing, making sure all the supplies are there, for the rest of us it's just fun. Sympathy or empathy? So, how can we get started with this sympathy versus empathy thing in 2012? I'd like to get you started with just one suggestion. During 2011, Elaine and I wrote various articles in The Visitor to keep you up on what was happening with our dear friends in Matamoros. You guys could have had sympathy for those brothers and sisters. I'm sorry you don't have running water. I'm sorry you don't have electricity. I'm so sorry there are days you have nothing to eat. No, instead you showed empathy and generously donated your change in the jars we provided at the back of the churches. That change allowed plywood to be purchased to fix holes in the walls of Concha and Javier's home. It helped pay for Leonor's gallbladder surgery last September. It allowed Francisco and Guadalupe to purchase windows for the home that we built for them last February. Sympathy or empathy? David Nelsestuen is leaving for Matamoros on Sunday, February 12th. How I wish I was going with him again. We are going to be emptying the jars after worship today, and we're going to cut a check for David to take with him to continue the ministry of these dear people. Think back on that story of the Good Samaritan. Will you walk by the other side of the road, like the priests and the Levite, pretending not to notice these people in need? Or will you be led to empathy, to do what you can to help? Sympathy or empathy? What have been your experiences with empathy? Do you remember how you felt when someone said or did something to help you? You will give to others that same kind of experience when you, this year, empathize with them. Will you go through 2012 status quo? Or will you choose to see how empathy can change your life and perhaps the life of Pecatonica Parish? Empathy or sympathy? I ask you to pray about it and joyfully respond as God leads.